and welcome to Stories for Wonderful Children. I'm Dan Wendelin, your host and storyteller. Years ago, I began recording the bedtime stories I told my children every night. Now, I'd like to share those stories with you. I hope you enjoy my Stories for Wonderful Children.
Once upon a time, there was a boy named Terry. Terry. And Terry was in most respects an ordinary boy. He liked to do the things that most ordinary boys like to do. He liked to run. He liked to throw balls. He liked to draw pictures. He liked to have snacks. He liked making peanut butter sandwiches and eating them. He also liked to go outside and play and swing, and he liked to build with his blocks. In most ways, Terry was an ordinary boy, like any other ordinary boy that you would meet. But there was one thing about Terry that was rather peculiar. It was something that he himself didn't know for a very long time, but one day he discovered it. This is the story of that day. He had woken up quite early that morning. He wasn't really sure why. Usually he liked to sleep in, but that morning after he had woken up, he just couldn't get back to sleep. He got up and watched the sunrise, which was something he had not seen very often. He enjoyed it, watching the sky go from a dark gray to sort of a light pink color to an orange, and then blue as the sun peeked over the horizon. He decided that since he was up so early, he would go ahead and have breakfast and go outside. He had some flakes, and...
I had flakes too!
Yes, and milk, and he had some cherries to eat, and he had, to top it all off, a little glass of orange juice. When his mommy and daddy got up, he was already dressed and ready to go outside, and he told them he was going to go, and they said that was fine. He went outside to play in his backyard. He swung on the swing for a few minutes, and then he climbed up into the treehouse. And while he was up in the treehouse, he started to climb down, but as he climbed down, he looked below him, and on the ground below him, he saw a snake. Now, Terry was old enough to know that you had to be cautious of snakes, because even though snakes are usually more afraid of you than you are of them, some snakes bite, and some of the snakes that bite are poisonous, and you would not want them to bite you. So he decided that he had really better stay up in the treehouse. So he climbed back up to the top of the ladder and looked down at the snake at the bottom. He had sat there for quite a few minutes, wondering if his parents were going to come outside and see him, or if somebody was going to discover that he was stuck up in the treehouse. And so he looked down at the snake and said, "I just wish you'd go away. Why are you sitting down there at the bottom of my ladder?" And then something happened that surprised him. The snake replied. It said, "It's warm and sunny here. Why don't you just come down? I won't bite you." Terry was very surprised. He was so surprised he almost fell off the ladder. He stuck his fingers in his ears and wiggled them around to make sure he didn't have a loose piece of earwax that was making him hear things. But he couldn't find any earwax, and so he looked at the snake again and said, "Did you just talk to me?" And the snake just looked at him. Terry said, "You just talked to me, didn't you?" And the snake said, "Bright boy, of course I talked to you. Snakes are always talking to people, but nobody knows how to listen. Apparently you do." Terry said, "Well, I didn't, He was so surprised he didn't really know what to say. He said, "Well, I didn't know that I knew how to listen. I tell you what, even though I'm talking to you, I'd feel much more comfortable if you would just crawl away from the ladder so that I could get down. Would you do that for me, please?" And the snake said, Oh, and at that very moment it slithered further away from the ladder. It crawled for a minute until it reached another sunny spot, and then it curled up again and turned to look back at Terry. Terry climbed down the ladder and started to walk inside. At just that moment, his daddy came outside the back door. His daddy spotted the snake immediately and said, "Terry, get away from the snake." He went into the garage and got a shovel. He was going to kill the snake because he was worried that it might hurt Terry. Terry turned and said, "Look, I can't explain to my dad that you're not going to bite me. You need to go away now." The snake said, "All right," and it uncurled and slithered away very quickly, and by the time Terry's daddy got back out into the backyard with the shovel, the snake was gone. Terry said, "Sorry, Dad, it left already." And his dad said, "Okay, well, you be careful when you're out in the backyard. I don't want you getting bitten." And then he gave Terry a big hug, and he went off to work. Terry thought that this was perhaps the most peculiar day he'd ever had. He thought about what he should do next, and as he was thinking about it, his mother came out and said, "Terry, I thought we'd go to the zoo today. Would you like to go?" And Terry said, "Oh, yes." And so they got into the car and they went to the zoo. They got to the zoo and his mother was looking at all the different things they could do. She said, "Would you like to go see the elephants or the lions or the kangaroos or the reptile house?" And Terry said, "Oh, the reptile house. Will there be snakes in the reptile house?" And his mother said, "Yes." And Terry said, "Let's go there." So they went to the reptile house, and Terry had to cover his ears. There were so many different snakes talking at once. One snake was talking about, "Oh, I just didn't like that last batch of food they gave us. It just didn't taste." And another snake was talking about, "Well, did you hear what she said? She said that my skin was looking old and it was time for me to molt." And there was another snake, a very big snake with a deep voice, that was saying, "Oh, I miss being back in my river at home. This cage is just too small." Terry found all of their conversations very interesting, but he didn't talk to any of them because he really didn't know what he would say. He had, however, what he was quite sure to be the most interesting day he had ever had at the zoo, and he learned a great deal about snakes and what they thought about. At the end of the day, he went back home, and as they were arriving back in the yard, his mother pulled the car into the garage, and then Terry got out. He looked around to see if his friend, the snake from earlier, was there, but he didn't see him. However, he did see another snake. This was a snake that had a very triangular head, which is something that Terry knew from talking to his mommy and daddy meant that the snake was poisonous. Terry thought that he would try talking to the snake from a safe distance, so he said, "Hello there." The snake just looked at him. Terry said, "Don't you have anything to say?" And the snake said, "Go away. I don't like people." And Terry said, "Okay, well, if you wouldn't mind leaving our yard, please." And the snake said, "Oh, fine." And it wriggled off. After it had been gone for a few minutes, Terry saw the snake that he had seen earlier, the green one, come back into the yard. Terry said, "Hello," and he told him all about his visit to the zoo. He said, "I was wondering, what's your name?" And the snake said, "Snake." And Terry said, "Don't you have another name besides that?" And the snake said, "Well, yes, but I'm not sure if you can pronounce it." And he told him his name was Right. And Terry said, "Oh, you mean And the snake said, "Yes, that's right." It said, I've never talked to a human before, and I might like to come back and talk to you again, since you're the only human I can talk to. What's your name?" And Terry said, "My name is Terry." He said, "My mom is going to call me in for dinner now, but it was very nice meeting you." And the snake said, "Likewise, Terry. Bye-bye." And then Terry went inside and ate dinner. And that is the story of the day that Terry discovered what was very peculiar about him.
Thanks for listening to Stories for Wonderful Children. I created, told, and edited today's story. Questions and witty commentary were supplied by my children. The music was composed by Brandon Thompson. If you enjoy the show, please tell someone about it, or leave a review on your podcast provider. Our email is storiesforwonderfulchildren@gmail.com. You can also contact us on Facebook or Twitter. I'll see you next time.